They called it a surprise. My parents were grinning ear to ear, neighbors gathered in the driveway, cameras out. And right in the middle of it, parked under the afternoon sun, was a shiny black BMW with a giant red bow on top. My sister squealed, threw her hands in the air like she'd just won a game show, and ran into the driver's seat. Everyone clapped. My mom wiped a tear. My dad made a toast with his plastic cup of soda like this was the coronation of a queen. And then there was me, standing in the corner holding what my parents handed me, a crisp $2 bill. "Keep it," my mom said proudly, like she was giving me the key to the city. "It's symbolic." Symbolic of what exactly? That my worth could be measured in spare change? That I was the punchline in my own family? So yes, that was the moment I realized that if I stayed one more day in that house, I'd suffocate in silence. At 2 a.m., while everyone else was still buzzing about the BMW surprise, I packed a small bag, blocked my entire family on my phone, and drove away without looking back. But let's pause. Because you're probably wondering, who leaves their entire family over a car? Who walks away because of a red bow and $2? It sounds dramatic, it sounds petty, but trust me, it wasn't about the money. It never was. See, humiliation doesn't start with one big blow. It's death by 1,000 little cuts. The BMW was just the last one. So let's rewind. My name? Let's just say I was always the other child. Not the golden one, not the miracle baby, not the one who filled photo albums. If my sister was the star student, the homecoming queen, the apple of everyone's eye, then I was the unpaid background actor. I grew up learning how to clap for her achievements before I even learned how to ride a bike. Every birthday party, she got balloons and candles. Me? I got, "Don't make a fuss, honey, we're saving money." Every school play, they cheered loudest when she smiled. I could have juggled flaming swords on stage, and maybe they'd glance up from their phones. Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't jealous of my sister. Okay, maybe a little. But mostly, I was exhausted. Exhausted from always being the family's afterthought, the sidekick to her spotlight. That's why the BMW wasn't just a car. It was the grand finale of years of being told in not-so-subtle ways that I didn't matter as much. The bow wasn't just ribbon, it was a message. She deserves more. You don't. And standing there with my $2 bill, I realized something I should have known a long time ago. You can't force people to value you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop waiting for applause, pick up your bag, and walk out the door. But hold up. This isn't a sob story. It's a redemption story. Because what happened after that night? That's where things get interesting. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's rewind to where it all began. Before the BMW, before the $2, before the 2 a.m. escape. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. I wasn't born angry. I wasn't even born resentful. If you'd met me as a kid, you would have met the kind of child who tried way too hard to be good. The kind who thought if she smiled big enough, worked hard enough, maybe, just maybe, she'd finally be noticed. But in my family, trying didn't equal shining. Not for me, anyway. See, there are families where love feels like air, always present, always filling you up without you even realizing. And then there are families like mine, where love felt like musical chairs. There were only so many seats, and somehow, every time the music stopped, I was left standing. Childhood. The other kid. My sister was the sun, blonde hair that caught the light just right, dimples deep enough to win strangers over in grocery stores. Teachers adored her. Relatives spoiled her. She had a laugh that sounded like bells, and everyone tuned their ears to hear it. Me? I was more like the moon. Quiet, pale, easy to forget unless you happened to look up at the right moment. I wasn't ugly. I wasn't mean. I just wasn't her. I remember one Christmas when I was 8. She unwrapped a Barbie dream house, 3 new dolls, and a karaoke machine. I got socks, not even the fuzzy kind, just plain white socks in a plastic pack. My mom said, "Well, you needed them. Needed them." That was my role. My sister got wants. I got needs. Birthdays, hers. Looked like Pinterest boards come to life. Balloons, cousins invited, cakes with her name in frosting. Mine. If I was lucky, I got a cupcake with a single candle. One year, my dad actually said, "You don't like a big fuss anyway, right?" Right, because an 8-year-old is famous for hating parties. School years. Fighting to be seen. School. Became my escape. I figured if I couldn't be the favorite at home, maybe I could be the achiever elsewhere. And I was. Straight A's. Perfect attendance, science fair ribbons. But guess what? When I brought home a report card with all A's, my mom said, "Good job, honey, but don't rub it in. Your sister's struggling in math." So I learned to fold my victories small, like origami birds no one cared to unfold. I joined choir, won a regional essay contest, even made honor roll every single semester. My sister, meanwhile, got cast as the lead in the school play. My parents showed up opening night with flowers for her. When I asked if they'd come to see me get my essay award, my mom said, "Oh, honey, that's not really an event." Not an event. My whole life felt like not an event. Dreams that didn't fit what I wanted more than anything: to study architecture. I loved buildings, blueprints, the way lines on paper could become entire worlds. I sketched houses in notebooks, little dream spaces where everyone had a room, a window, a place to belong. When I told my parents, they laughed. Not cruelly, just dismissively. "That's cute," my dad said, "but that's a lot of school, and you're not the academic one. Your sister's the bright star." That sentence stuck like a tattoo. You're not the academic one. So I buried it. I stopped talking about architecture, stopped drawing blueprints. Instead, I worked part-time jobs, babysitting, waitressing, shelving books at the library, because someone had to buy my clothes and school supplies. My parents called it independence. I called it survival. The small betrayals, it wasn't always the big things. Sometimes it was death by 1,000 paper cuts, like the time I saved up $40 from babysitting to buy my mom a necklace for Mother's Day. She opened it, smiled politely, then said, "You didn't have to waste your money." Meanwhile, my sister handed her a construction paper card with crooked hearts, and Mom cried like it was a Hallmark commercial, or the time I got sick with the flu and asked for soup. My dad brought me medicine from the dollar store and said, "You'll be fine." A week later, my sister had a mild cold, and they practically turned the living room into a hospital ward. Blankets, humidifier, Gatorade, constant checking in. It wasn't that they hated me. Hate is at least passionate. What I got was worse: indifference. The collapse high school graduation was supposed to be a turning point. I worked so hard thinking maybe that stage walk would finally earn me a round of applause. But when the day came, my parents showed up late. They missed me crossing the stage. Later, my mom said, "Well, it all goes by so fast, we barely noticed." That was the moment. The slow, bitter realization that nothing I did would ever be enough to move them. Not grades, not jobs, not sacrifices, nothing. So when college came around, I didn't even bother asking for help. I applied for scholarships, took out loans, worked 2 part-time jobs. My sister, she got her tuition covered, a car, and a new laptop to set her up right. I got a good luck text. Survival mode, I won't lie. Those years were brutal. I worked shifts at a diner until 2 a.m., studied until 4 a.m., slept a few hours, then dragged myself to class. I learned to stretch ramen noodles into gourmet meals, learned how to buy textbooks secondhand and resell them, learned how to iron a blouse in a bathroom hand dryer before a job interview. Some nights, I cried in silence, face buried in a pillow, not because of the work, but because of the invisibility. Nobody noticed the toll it took. Nobody said, "I'm proud of you." But you know what? Even in survival mode, I kept going. Every little victory, an A on a paper, a paycheck that covered rent, was mine alone. I didn't need applause. I just needed air. The bitter truth looking back, here's what hurts the most. I wasn't asking for luxury. I wasn't asking for BMWs or red bows. All I wanted was to be seen, to be loved without conditions, to matter as much as my sister did. But in my house, attention was a limited resource, and I was the ration card nobody wanted to use. And so I grew up with this quiet ache, dreams buried under duty, talent wasted on survival, laughter muted by exhaustion. That's why the BMW broke me. Not because of the car, but because it was the exclamation mark at the end of a lifelong sentence. You're less. You'll always be less. But here's the thing about being treated as less. Sometimes it becomes the fuel that makes you more. And that fuel? That's what carried me into the turning point of my story. The funny thing about change, it never announces itself politely. It doesn't knock on the door with a gift basket and say, "Hey, I'm here to fix your life." No, it shows up in strange, awkward, sometimes painful ways. For me, it began with a chance encounter and a simmering realization. I didn't have to keep playing the role my family wrote for me. College and the first spark. I'd been grinding through my second year of college, juggling shifts at the diner and classes that demanded more brain power than caffeine could supply. One night, after spilling coffee on a regular customer's shirt, I apologized 100 times and offered to cover the dry cleaning. Instead of being angry, he laughed. "You're sharper than this place," he said, dabbing his tie with a napkin. "What are you studying?" "Architecture," I muttered, embarrassed, because by then I'd stopped saying it out loud. Dreams feel fragile once you've convinced yourself they're silly. His eyebrows shot up. "Really? My firm's looking for interns this summer. Ever thought of applying?" I almost laughed. "Me? An intern at a real architecture firm?" That sounded like asking a marathon runner to hand me the gold medal before I'd even finished lacing my shoes. But that night I sat down with my dusty old sketches, the ones I'd hidden in a shoebox, and applied anyway. The internship. A. Glimpse of light somehow, against every doubt I carried, I got the internship. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't designing skyscrapers. Mostly, I printed blueprints, fetched coffee, and answered phones. But here's the thing. I was in the room. I was finally in the room where people spoke the language of my heart. Angles, lines, light, form. My supervisor, Mr. Alvarez, was the first adult outside of school who ever looked at me like I had potential. He once caught me sketching during lunch break and asked to see my notebook. I expected him to laugh. Instead, he studied my drawings like they mattered. "You've got an eye," he said. "Don't waste it." That single sentence lit a spark. I hadn't felt in years. It felt like oxygen rushing into lungs that had been starving. Meanwhile, back home. Of course, I couldn't share any of this with my family. When I mentioned the internship, my mom waved it off. "Unpaid? That's not a job, it's a hobby." My dad asked, "But when are you going to get serious?" "Your sister already has." Everything lined up. Everything lined up, that was their favorite phrase. My sister's path was a red carpet. Mine was gravel and potholes. Still, I stayed quiet. Because silence was safer than explaining to people who weren't listening. The injustice. The real turning point didn't come from encouragement, though. It came from a slap in the face. One weekend, I came home to visit. My sister had just gotten accepted into a prestigious business program. There was a celebratory dinner. Balloons, champagne, the works. During dessert, my dad raised his glass and said, "We're so proud of you. You've always been destined for greatness." And then he turned to me, still holding his glass, and added, "And we're proud of you too, for being so independent." The word independent landed like a curse. Not gifted, not talented, not extraordinary, just independent. Translation: You're on your own. That night, I went upstairs, shut the door, and cried so hard my ribs hurt. But when the tears dried, something in me hardened. If they wouldn't see me, I'd make the world see me. The ethical dilemma of few. Months later at the firm, I stumbled onto something that tested me. I was organizing blueprints for a new housing project, cookie-cutter suburban homes. But as I compared the approved plans to the ones being presented to investors, I noticed discrepancies. Corners cut, safety features missing, costs hidden. Wasn't naive. I knew corporations played dirty. But this meant real families might move into unsafe homes. I wrestled with it for days. Speak up and risk losing the only opportunity I'd ever had? Or stay silent like I always did and let injustice slide by? In the end, silence felt too familiar, too much like home, and I refused to keep repeating the same story. So I quietly gathered documents, kept notes, and presented them to Mr. Alvarez. 2. My surprise, he didn't scold me, he thanked me. And when he brought it up in a board meeting, crediting me for catching the issue, the room went still. For the first time in my life, my name carried weight. Rising conflict at home, of course. My family couldn't know any of this. Back home, the narrative was simple. My sister was thriving, I was scraping by. At Thanksgiving, my aunt leaned over and whispered, "You'll find your thing someday, sweetie. Don't worry." I wanted to scream. I already found it. You. Just don't care to ask. Then came Christmas. My sister unwrapped a designer handbag. I got, no joke, a novelty mug that said, "World's okayest daughter." Everyone laughed. I smiled, but inside I was breaking. I kept wondering, was I really this invisible? Or had they decided I was easier to ignore than to understand? The crack widens one evening. While scrolling through social media, I saw my parents posting photos of a surprise dinner they'd thrown for my sister's scholarship. Candles, gifts, speeches. I hadn't even known about it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the app, packed my work bag, and told myself, fine. If they won't celebrate me, I'll celebrate myself. That was the night I bought a single cupcake from a grocery store, lit a candle, and whispered, "Congrats, kid. You're still here." It sounds silly, but that small act felt rebellious. Like saying, I see you even if they don't. The build-up by. The time the infamous BMW day rolled around, the tension was already a balloon stretched thin. Every holiday, every gathering, every small slight had blown air into it. The internship gave me hope, my family gave me despair, and the mix of the two created a storm I couldn't outrun. Because while I was slowly learning that my voice mattered out in the world, I was still mute at home. And that contradiction? That was the true conflict. The more recognition I gained outside, the more invisible I felt inside. It was a tug of war that could only end one way, with the rope snapping, the foreshadowing. I remember one night at the diner, wiping down tables after a long shift. Mr. Alvarez had just texted me inviting me to apply for a full-time role after graduation. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. But when I got home and shared the news, my mom shrugged. "That's nice, honey, but don't get your hopes up. Those things never work out." She said it casually, not even looking at me, like she was commenting on the weather, and in that moment I realized something bone deep. My biggest challenge wasn't poverty or competition or exhaustion. It was the people closest to me refusing to believe in me. That, more than anything, would become the fire under my feet. Rising stakes, so the stage was set. On one side, the first fragile signs of a future I wanted: mentors, talent, recognition. On the other, the crushing weight of a family that had already decided who I was, the independent one, the background actor, and as those two worlds collided, the stakes grew higher. Because here's the thing, when you're ignored long enough, you don't just crave recognition. You demand it, and the BMW, that glittering car with the red bow, that was the demand colliding with the denial. But before we get there, you need to see how far the cracks had already spread, so that when the balloon finally popped, you'll understand why the sound echoed so loudly in my chest. The conflict was brewing, the betrayal was simmering, and soon enough everything would boil over into the breaking point. The invitation came casually. "Just a small dinner," my mom said over the phone. "Bring yourself. Nothing fancy." I almost didn't go. By then, I'd learned that family dinners usually meant my sister being paraded while I sat in the corner like background decor. But guilt is a powerful leash. So I drove home, convincing myself it would just be another harmless evening. I couldn't have been more wrong. The setup, when I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Cars lined the street, balloons tied to the mailbox, fairy lights, strung across the porch. This wasn't a casual dinner. It was a production. My stomach sank. I hadn't been told about this. My parents had dressed it up like a small get-together, but the truth was obvious. Tonight was about my sister. Again. Inside, people mingled. Neighbors, cousins, family friends. A banner stretched across the living room wall. "Congratulations." "Emily!" I smiled politely as hugs were exchanged. Nobody asked about me. Nobody even noticed I'd been missing from most family events lately. They were here for the star. I was just filler. Then came the announcement. My dad clinked a glass, calling everyone outside. The crowd shuffled into the driveway, laughter and camera flashes buzzing in the air. And there it was, the reveal headlights, cut through the dusk as a sleek black BMW rolled forward. On its hood sat a massive red bow, the kind you see in commercials designed to make viewers weep with envy. My sister gasped, covering her mouth like she'd just been crowned Miss America. She squealed, jumped into my parents' arms, and cried. Tears of joy. The neighbors cheered. Phones rose into the air, capturing the grand reveal. Someone shouted, "She deserves it!" My mom and dad stood beaming like royalty bestowing a crown. "For our Emily," my dad announced proudly, "the future of this family. We know you'll drive far." Applause erupted. The car gleamed under the porch lights, every reflection a reminder of everything I wasn't. And me? I stood frozen, heart pounding, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice the absurdity, but no one did. The insult. "Wait," my mom said, turning toward me with a smile. "We didn't forget you." She reached into her purse and handed me a small white envelope. Inside was a crisp $2 bill. "Keep it," she said warmly. "It's symbolic." Laughter rippled through the crowd, light-hearted, as though I'd been included in the joke. But it wasn't a joke to me. It was the exclamation point on a lifetime of being overlooked. $2. While my sister posed with her BMW cameras, flashing. $2. While my parents toasted her future. $2. While I stood there invisible, humiliated, erased. I forced a smile, because that's what I'd been trained to do. But inside, I was unraveling. The inner storm. The applause blurred into static. My sister's laughter echoed, tinny and sharp. My parents' faces glowed with pride, pride that had never once been directed at me, and then came the whispers. Emily's. Always been the gifted one. She's going places. She deserves this. Not one word about me. Not one acknowledgement that I'd clawed my way through school, through jobs, through nights of exhaustion. I clenched the $2 bill, in my fist so tightly it crumpled. My throat burned with words I'd never say, because what was the point? Nobody would listen. That was the cruelest part. Not the car, not the bill, but the certainty that nothing I said could change the narrative they'd written for me. The breaking point later that night, after the guests left and the laughter died down, I slipped upstairs to my old room. The walls still had posters from my teenage years, silent witnesses to the years I'd spent trying to belong. I sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, and let the tears come. Years of swallowed hurt, Years of don't. Make a fuss. Years of clapping for someone else while I stood empty-handed. The BMW wasn't just a car. It was proof that my place in this family was permanent. Second best, afterthought, background character, and suddenly I couldn't do it anymore. At 2 a.m., I got up, quietly, carefully. I opened the closet, pulled out a duffel bag, and started packing. A few clothes, my notebooks, the bare minimum. My hands shook, but my decision was steady. Before leaving, I opened the drawer, pulled out the $2 bill, and set it on the nightstand. Not to keep, but to leave behind, like a receipt for everything I refused to pay anymore. Then I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and blocked every family number. The escape. The night air was cool, the streets silent except for the hum of insects. I walked to my old beat-up car, tossed the duffel bag into the back seat, and sat behind the wheel. The house loomed behind me, glowing warm through the windows, filled with laughter I was never invited into. I took one last look, and for the first time I didn't feel longing. I felt release. With a deep breath, I started the engine. It roared louder than usual, like it understood the weight of what it was carrying. As I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back. Not once, because if I had, I might have lost my nerve. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. For the first time in my life, I wasn't driving toward their approval. I was driving toward myself. The power shift people think breaking points are loud, screams, slammed doors, dramatic speeches. But mine was quiet. It was the sound of a zipper closing on a duffel bag, the click of a block button on my phone, the low hum of an engine pulling me away from a life where I'd never been seen. Sometimes power doesn't come from shouting the truth. Sometimes it comes from leaving the room where your truth is constantly denied. That night, I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the afterthought, the background actor, the family's unpaid intern. That night, at 2 a.m., I became the author of my own story. Dear audience, if you're feeling this turning point, if you've ever walked away from a place that refused to see your worth, don't forget to give this story a like. It really helps the channel, and it shows you're part of this journey with me. Because trust me, what came after that night was harder, lonelier, but also brighter than anything I'd ever known. And that's where the redemption begins, the first morning. The first morning after I left felt strange. I woke in a motel room off the highway, thin curtains leaking sunlight, the hum of trucks outside. For a moment, panic surged. I had no plan, no safety net. Just a duffel bag and the faint ache of what I'd left behind. But then I realized something. I also had silence. No voices mocking me, no comparisons, no staged applause I didn't earn. Just me. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the beginning. Learning. To stand alone. The weeks that followed weren't easy. I rented a tiny apartment, bare walls, a mattress on the floor, secondhand pots and pans. At night, loneliness curled around me like fog, but every morning, I forced myself up. I took jobs wherever I could. Temp work, bookkeeping, late-night cleaning. I saved every dollar. For the first time, the money I earned stayed mine. And slowly, something shifted. When no one's clapping, you learn to clap for yourself. The first bill I paid on time, applause. The first week I didn't cry myself to sleep, applause. The first time I looked in the mirror and saw someone strong, not small, a standing ovation. The spark of purpose one evening, while doing freelance accounting for a local mechanic, I noticed a stack of invoices shoved in a drawer. They were wrong, deliberately wrong. Someone was skimming money from the business. Stayed up that night, reworking the numbers, building a clean ledger. The next day, I showed the owner. His jaw dropped. "You caught this?" Nobody else noticed. Word spread. Soon other small businesses called me, asking for help untangling their books. Not glamorous work, but necessary. That's when it hit. Me. My family had dismissed my skills for years, but here they were saving livelihoods. I wasn't just a background character. I was the difference between collapse and survival, building something of my own. With every client, my confidence grew. I printed cheap business cards. Independent Forensic Bookkeeping. Not a fancy title, but it was mine. Within a year, I had more clients than I could handle. I left cleaning jobs behind. I upgraded from the mattress on the floor to a real bed, from instant noodles to groceries that filled a fridge, and more than the money, I had dignity. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval anymore. I was building a life brick by brick, number by number, truth by truth. Giving back. The turning point came when a young single mother walked into my office. She'd been fired after catching errors at her company but didn't know how to prove it. Her hands shook as she explained, voice cracking with shame. I saw myself in her, the invisibility, the dismissal, the ache of being unheard. So I trained her. Nights at my desk, explaining spreadsheets, teaching her the red flags. Within months, she was confident, capable, unstoppable, and when she landed a better job at a bigger firm, she hugged me and whispered, "You changed my life." That night, I decided, this wasn't just business. This was mission, a new kind of. Family over the years, I trained dozens of women like her, immigrants, single moms, women overlooked by bosses who assumed they were just support staff. I gave them the tools to see the truth in numbers, to stand tall in rooms that tried to shrink them. We weren't blood, but we were family, a chosen one. The kind that applauds your victories and picks you up when you fall. And in that family, I was never invisible. The full circle one summer afternoon, years later, I received an invitation, a family reunion. Against my better judgment, I went. The house looked the same, but I didn't. I parked not in the driveway, but down the street. My car wasn't a BMW. It was a modest sedan I'd bought outright. No beau, no parade, but it was mine. Paid with money I earned, with work nobody could take credit for. Inside, my sister was still the star, spinning stories of her successes. My parents still beamed at her, clapping at every pause. But for the first time, I didn't flinch. Because I wasn't there for their applause. I had my own. When someone asked what I did now, I answered plainly, I run a consulting firm. We train women in forensic accounting. Some of our clients are Fortune 500s. The room went quiet. Even my sister blinked. For once, all eyes were on me, and I smiled. Not for them, but for myself. Reflection. People think redemption is about proving. Others wrong. But it isn't. It's about proving yourself right. I used to believe I was invisible, that my worth depended on their recognition, that if they didn't see me, I wasn't there. But now I know. Visibility starts within. When you see yourself clearly, the world eventually catches up. Life now versus then. $2 bills and fake smiles. Now, a bank account I built, clients who trust me, women who thank me. Then, standing silent in the shadow of a BMW. Now, standing tall in rooms filled with women who drive their own cars, their own futures. Then, waiting for permission to matter. Now, never asking again. The healing. I don't hold anger anymore. Anger is heavy, and I carried it long enough. Instead, I hold lessons. I learned resilience from neglect. I learned strength from silence. I learned that sometimes the family you're born into is blind, so you build a new one that sees, and in that building, you find peace. Closing words. When I look back now, I don't see the humiliation in the driveway anymore. I see the night I chose myself at 2 a.m. That was the true gift. Not the BMW, not the $2 bill, but the moment I finally realized I was worth more than their recognition. Today, I walk into rooms and people listen, not because I shout, but because I carry the weight of a life I rebuilt. I'm no longer invisible. I'm undeniable. Thanks for staying with me through this journey. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to walk away from a place that couldn't see your worth, don't forget to give this a like and subscribe. We share stories like this every week, and your support keeps them alive. Because in the end, every one of us deserves to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, your redemption is closer than you think. They once called Ruth invisible. Too quiet, too ordinary, too small to matter. But invisibility has a strange power. It lets you listen when others only speak. It lets you notice cracks in the walls no one else dares to touch. And sometimes, it lets you prepare for a moment no one sees coming. Ruth's story isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about dignity. It's about courage. It's about the choice to rise when the world has already decided you belong on the floor. The lesson we're left with. Maybe you've felt it too. That moment when your voice shakes in a room full of people who underestimate you. That sting of being mocked when all you wanted was to contribute. That deep ache of giving your all and being handed nothing back. What Ruth teaches us is this: recognition isn't the prize. Integrity is. Applause fades. But truth stays. And when you stand for truth, even if no one notices at first, eventually the world has to stop and listen. The twist of legacy. Here's the part they don't tell you in the headlines. Years after that boardroom showdown, long after Ruth built her consulting firm, something remarkable happened. A girl, barely 18, walked into her office with trembling hands. She was the daughter of one of the women Ruth had trained. She wanted to study finance, but didn't think she was smart enough. Ruth smiled, handed her a stack of old ledgers, and said, "Start here. Numbers don't lie, and neither should you." That girl went on to graduate top of her class. She now works at a global firm, mentoring others the same way Ruth once mentored her mother. So Ruth's legacy isn't just the businesses she saved, it's the ripple effect, an unbroken chain of women lifting each other, one truth at a time. The reflection and our. Maybe that's the real takeaway. You don't need a title to matter. You don't need applause to have impact. You don't need to be visible to change the world, because sometimes the greatest revolutions begin in silence. Sometimes the strongest warriors don't wear armor, they wear humility. And sometimes the janitor, the outsider, the overlooked one, is the very person holding the key to justice. A question for us. I'll leave you with this. The next time you walk past someone you think is ordinary, what invisible brilliance might you be missing? What truth might they be carrying quietly, waiting for the right moment to be heard? Because Ruth's story reminds us. The mop never defined her, the silence never broke her, and the applause she never got? She didn't need it. She became undeniable anyway. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.